Thank you. All right, welcome to the Select Board meeting of March 10th. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So just so people know, this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Easton ECAT local cable and is available upon demand. We're just going to introduce ourselves to ensure that we have a quorum, starting with Jamie.
Jamie Stebbins.
Jennifer Stacy.
Mark Lamb.
Dottie Fulgenetti.
Craig Barger.
And we have Connor Reed, our town administrator, Sean Dugan, our assistant town administrator, and Elizabeth Hegg, our executive assistant. So we are going to jump right into the agenda, starting with one-day liquor licenses. The first one is Stonehill College, the cross-country alumni event at W.B. Mason Stadium. Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, April 5th, 2025, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a storm date of April 6th. Any questions?
We have a squeaky table.
Oh. Craig, you want to make the
Yeah,
motion?
I'll move that we approve the Stonehill College Cross Country Alumni Event, WB Mason Stadium, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, April 5th, 2025, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a storm date of April 6th.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. I should just mention, also, I neglected to say that there is not the Easton Police do not require a detail for that one. The next one is Kevin O'Dwyer, the Spring Food Festival at Langwater Farm, 215 Washington Street, April 5th, 2025, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with a storm date of April 6th. Kevin O'Dwyer has applied for this one-day beer and wine license for the Spring Food Festival. And the food festival celebrates local artisans, farmers, and producers who supply their farm store. These small business owners will be on-site leading demos, offering samples of their products. And Langwater Farm will also be making their famous wood-fired pizza, pouring Shoveltown Brewery beer, and grilling their own Langwater carrot dogs. An Easton Police detail is not required for this. And if you want more information, you can look on their social media, and they'll have more details.
It's always a good time. I move to approve the Spring Food Festival at Langwater Farm, 215 Washington Street, April 5, 2025, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with a storm date of April 6th.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Next, Jason Paganelli, Annual Narragansett Summer Running Festival, behind Donahue Hall, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, July 13th, 2025, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., with a storm date of July 20th. Jason from True North Running Company, LLC, has applied for a one-day beer and wine license for the Narragansett Summer Running Festival. The Easton Police require that festival organizers contact the police station to schedule the detail officers as needed for road closures and crossings. I'm sure their social media and website has more details about signing up to run. You know about that one, right, Craig?
Yeah.
So if you'd like to make a motion?
I move to approve the one-day beer and wine license for the Narragansett Summer Running Festival to be held behind Donahue Hall at Stonehill College on Sunday, July 13th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. All right, moving right along. Item 2 is to vote for the adoption of graduated retiree health care insurance rate structure effective January 1st, 2026. Connor?
Sure, thank you, Dottie. This will be a somewhat long verbal presentation. It's largely going to mirror what's in your notes, but I think it's important for anyone who's following along to hear, and just so we have a good discussion with the board. As the board knows, the town joined the GIC, the Group Insurance Commission, in the past to reduce both of our health insurance costs that are borne by the municipal budget. We currently pay 75% of premiums for individual and family plans for a majority of our plans outside of indemnity plans, and that is mirrored largely in our retiree rates. Since fiscal 15, which was our last year before leaving our former health insurance carrier to go into the GIC, which for anyone who's not familiar is a state insurance consortium that purchases and manages a variety of plans, I think about a dozen, for state employees and also a variety of cities and towns who opt in. So since fiscal 15, which was the last year before we joined the GIC, our budget for health insurance for active and retired town and school personnel has grown from 7.3 million in 15 to 9.5 million in 24. It's a cumulative budget growth of just about 2 million, 2.2 million over 9 years, which was equal to an annualized rate of about 3%, which for healthcare is actually quite good. When you look at Kaiser Family Foundation or other market data points on what the cost of employer-provided health insurance have done in the United States since 2014, much closer to 4.5% to 5% a year in growth. So we have actually had a very good run with controlling the cost of health insurance, which is critical to our ability to provide services and to promote fiscal stability. Unfortunately, that really good run was broken in the current fiscal year 25 when aggregate rates of GIC plans grew by 10% over the year before. We all talked a lot about this last spring. It was talked a lot about at town meeting. The substantial increase to the cost of health insurance in fiscal 25 was one of the most substantial impacts on why that budget was so difficult, why PACE was formed, and all of us appreciating that heading into 26, we were not going to be able to continue to sustain town and school services if we continue to see healthcare costs grow at rates like this. My budget message at that time warned that if these trends continued, we would need to be making some really difficult choices with operations or an override or with healthcare. Halfway through fiscal 25, so over the holidays, the GIC let members know that they should plan for up to a 12% increase going into fiscal 26. And that's what we carried in our preliminary budget, which had a very large deficit in large part due to health insurance. On February 27th, the Mass GIC, the commission voted to actually adopt their rates for fiscal 26. And regrettably, they were actually worse than what we were forecast. The aggregate was 12.7% increase year over year. Active plans range between a low, and I use that number loosely, a low increase of 10.5 to a high of 17% for year over year growth. Medicare supplement plans are growing at an average of 7.3. And again, that aggregate impact is about 12.7%. In a vacuum in 1 year, increases like this would be enough to throw your whole organizational budget into a crunch, but coming on the heels of a 10% increase, it's catastrophic. To have one of our largest fixed costs go up more than 20% in 2 years, as we've talked about a lot, is one of the main contributors to our operating shortfall next year. So again, our health budget grew by about $2 million in the 10 years leading into fiscal 24. They've now grown $2 million in 2 years. So our healthcare costs have grown as much in the past 2 years as they did in the past 10. And just for perspective, for anyone at home following along, when we start talking about numbers of this scale, it can get lost. $2 million of growth to this fixed cost is roughly, and I didn't know Kristen would be in the audience, but it is roughly what we spend to run all of health and community services for 2 years. $2 million of growth in this one fixed cost is more than the cumulative increases we have voted for the police department operations in the past decade. So this has a very substantially negative impact on our operating position. But outside of the challenges presents to our operating position for fiscal 26, it also will worsen our growing long-term financial liability posed by OPEB. Anyone who's been on the audit committee knows that acronym. It stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and it's basically the actuarial valuation of the long-term costs of the employer share of health insurance that we are likely to owe based on our existing workforce and retirement trends. That unfunded liability is in excess of $100 million already. We have an OPEB trust fund that has a nominal 6-figure balance in it. And this is the lack of proper long-term funding for OPEB. I don't want anyone listening thinking we're not paying our retiree benefits every year. We are, but we're doing it on a pay-as-you-go, which leaves us very vulnerable to market shocks like this. The lack of recurring funding for OPEB is a huge problem in municipal governments around the state. But I bring it up because it reinforces that this is pushing this past the point where we can not make a change. If our OPEB liability continues to grow at a time where, if there's not an override, when we head into 26, we'll be leaning on our reserves substantially. Those are numerous red, maybe not red, if not red, yellow flags being raised to ratings agencies at a time when we want to maintain our bond rating and our creditworthiness. And if you have a downgrade, then you risk a negative feedback loop where then interest on debt is higher, which further squeezes out available revenue for your operations, which, as we know, are already very strained. So this conversation about long-term liability posed by healthcare is not dissimilar to the long-term conversation around the structural revenue hole from state aid, right? We've talked for years that long-term gap born out of cuts to state revenue to the schools and the town, followed by minimal growth, would invariably force us to a decision point on can we sustain services without an override or not. So to have anyone in management, our labor leaders who follow this very closely, fretted that maintaining a 75-25 split of town to retiree for retiree benefits forever was not going to be possible. So, as I already said, we're at an inflection point. I don't think any assessment of the past 2 years of healthcare premium growth, and it's not just the GIC, you're seeing these massive rate increases in other municipal healthcare carriers as well. For anyone following along saying, well, why don't you just leave? We do every 2 years, do our loss ratios, and we go to market to see if we can get to a better place, and we haven't been able to. Keeping that in mind, I don't think we can look at the past 2 years of our healthcare trends, our existing budget deficit, and next year's outlook, and arrive at the conclusion that we can sustain what we are doing, even if an override's approved, frankly. The trends are just so bad. And we don't have any information to assume next year it's going to drop back to 3% a year. That would obviously be wonderful, but unless and until we see that stability in the market, we can't make that assumption. And so accordingly, the item in front of you tonight is a recommendation that I've put together working with our insurance advisors and legal counsel for the board under your authority. It's one Dottie and members have brought up in the past. Select boards, active healthcare plans are subject to collective bargaining with employee unions, but retiree benefits are set by vote of the select board under state law, chapter 32B. And looking at all of these factors and the immediate challenges it's posing and the growing long-term challenge that it poses, I'm recommending that the board adopt a multi-year descending plan, not to impact existing retirees. Those folks are on a fixed pension and retired with a certain set of assumptions, understandably, about health insurance from Easton after many years of service to the community. But for folks who do retire starting this January, and what I'm recommending there for both retirees under 65 on active plans and retirees over 65 on Medicare supplement plans is that we drop from our existing coverage and contribution of 75% down to 70 in January for anyone retiring January 1st, 2026 through the end of that year. And then the following January, 2027, dropping to 60-40 for those plans. This adjustment is forward-facing. It will not solve the immediate fiscal 26 budget deficit, but it will inarguably reduce our long-term financial liability and will, over time, as the workforce turns over, serve to help blunt the growth. I won't say cut because it's, who knows, if the baseline premium keeps going up 10% a year, maybe this helps blunt that, but we're not going down. But this will reduce and mitigate the impact of healthcare premiums on our operating budgets once this turns over by about 18%, which is meaningful. I don't make this recommendation to the board lightly. Our financial circumstances right now are demanding difficult choices throughout the community about the level of services that we could provide, the types of services that we could provide, the programs that we provide that are relied on by thousands of people or alternatively meaningfully raising taxes on our residents following the worst years of inflation in decades. And so as difficult and undesirable as this choice or my recommendation is, I don't think in good conscience I could shun this recommendation to the board when we're asking our workforce to make such hard choices, when we're asking our residents to make such hard choices, when this is one of the main drivers of our current financial distress. Again, I'm not attempting to mislead the board or anyone following along, but the immediate savings of this will not solve the fiscal 26 budget crisis because that first shift doesn't happen until halfway through the year. But every small change we make does matter. It does add up. As the board knows, there's no such thing as finding money when we're trying to balance the budget. It's the result of a lot of difficult $10, $20, $50, and $100,000 adjustments, and in this case, cuts. And again, this will put us on a healthier trajectory for our growing long-term financial liabilities in this area. I want to touch on a couple other things before getting to the specific recommendations and answering questions from the board, especially after being given the ballpark of up to 12%. We were all collectively bracing for impact and anticipating bad news from the GIC on these rates. So we convened a meeting of the Insurance Advisory Committee before tonight. The Insurance Advisory Committee is made up of town administration and finance staff, as well as representation from every town and school union, and a representative of our retirees. And the purpose of that meeting, we do meet every year to talk about plan design and the rates that the GIC has set, but we called the meeting early specifically so that we could have a discussion and I can notify them and they could hear about this then rather than on TV now, that I would be recommending this to the board. And I felt that was the right thing to do because our workforce is already facing a substantial amount of uncertainty and stress with job eliminations and cuts heading into the coming year. And I want to credit our unions, the town and school unions who are at the table, because the discussion was obviously challenging, but it was constructive and they were very thoughtful about it. And the labor representatives brought up, is there an alternative path here? And whether a shift in active employee premiums could offset the necessity of shifting future retiree rates. We had a good conversation about that. To do so would require adopting certain provisions of state law that you will see are the next item on your agenda. And there could be an opportunity there because active healthcare plans are so much more expensive than a Medicare supplement plan. Much more modest shifts from that 75-25 premium contribution could yield a larger budget savings than you would achieve with retiree plans. However, as was made clear with the unions, this would have to be a negotiation as a team through a PEC called a Public Employees Committee, that it would be a voluntary concession, frankly, and not something done under your typical bargaining where, I always want to make a joke of use another community that's Easton but pointing to a different direction, but Weston's a real town. So use a hypothetical negotiation scenario, and if you're representing your employees and your employer says, well, we are going to increase the cost of your health premiums by $10 a week. If a response is, okay, then our wages will go up 10, then we've just moved money from one pocket to the other. We've not achieved a savings, and the necessity of the change for retiree rates has not moved. And so folks appreciated that. They obviously did not represent or agree to anything on behalf of their unions because that was not what we were there to do. But they indicated a willingness to have that conversation. And so that's the item 3 on your agenda. And I do want to give credit to our employees for opening the door to that because I think sometimes folks, when they think about public sector benefits, think about it in the old school frame of free health insurance. We do have great benefits here. We do cover 3/4 of the cost, but if you are paying 25% of that premium and the base plan goes up 17%, that means the part coming out of your paycheck is going up 17% next year already. And so for those groups to be willing to have a conversation on perhaps there's another way to achieve a reduction in the OPEB hit, a reduction in the town's budget hit during a really hard time. I give them a lot of credit for that.
So what they would benefit from that is helping the retirees.
Their
take such a hit.
current members are, they're current members who are future retirees, right? If you're an employee who's working here and you're planning on retiring in the next 2 to 3 years, this is a massive change in your expectations, right?
So if everybody did agree to that, we could go back and re-vote
You could,
this.
yes.
If we voted affirmatively tonight to do that.
That's right.
We could go back and change it afterwards.
And we crafted your motion specifically to adopt the schedule I've already recommended, but with the contingency that if there is a shift in the active rates between the town and the appropriate representatives of our town and school labor leaders, that you could revisit, potentially adjust, roll back, delay, or rescind some of these adjustments.
But in any condition, people who've already got the plan that are already retired, there's going to be no change to them.
I'm not recommending you make any changes to active retirees. You could under the law, and that's something we did discuss with this group.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to make it sound foreboding or threatening, but that is obviously a quite draconian thing to do. But it is an option, and there are communities who have already gone down to 50-50 for retiree rates.
I just think it's important for anybody that's watching that is a retiree that's worried about that to know that we could do it and we're not doing it. So
Correct.
It's being thoughtful about where they are so that they just don't think it wasn't even an option. You know what I mean?
Correct, and they do have a very effective representative, Bill Downey, from the Bristol County Retirement Board, who is a really good part of this conversation as well, and he did identify that is an option that towns have. And so the recommendation that I'm laying out, I think, is already kind of a middle path, and that's why I thought it was important, both here for the public and as I conveyed to our labor leaders, that even if there's an override, the trajectories here are so bad and have moved so fast and so far in the wrong direction in the past 18 months that I don't want to mislead that this means, okay, we've done this and everything will be fine.
Right.
The trajectory with healthcare is absolutely out of control. It is almost unfathomable to see how much this has grown. And of course, we will do our work coming up before the next round to go to the market. But the market is really volatile right now. It is not a good time to be looking for health insurance. So I don't want to mislead and say we're going to be able to go somewhere else and save 20% and everything will be fine. But if there were that option, then we would do it.
Is there any way to incentivize the retirees? Is there a number of them that still have our plan, but they're eligible for Medicare as well?
So I'm going to look to Sue Shalou here. Sue is our longtime healthcare advisor from Cook & Company. We have adopted through the select board the provisions of state law that require that provided an employee is Medicare eligible when they reach 65, they have to move to Medicare. They can get a supplement plan through the town for Part D, I believe. But if you are Medicare eligible, it's already baked in Easton that you do move to Medicare. They don't stay on active plans if they have access to Medicare.
Good.
But you brought up incentives, which is good. And again, a question that's coming up a lot with PACE and folks, understandably, as we're thinking about a tax increase, we do go to market every 2 years with our claims history to see if we can get a better rate. We also run incentive and opt-out programs for our workforce that there's a menu of about a dozen health plans that have quite a swing in cost, right? And so every year we've been running a voluntary program that we do a savings share. So if you go from a plan, the most expensive plan to the most cost-effective plan, and it reduces the cost of your premium substantially, the town takes a portion of that savings and we credit through a one-time bonus to that person, a portion of the savings. And in the end, some of these plans have such a spread in cost that the public, the town, still ends up spending far less. We've saved up to $150,000 in a single year doing these plans. We also have an opt-out program which says if you're on our insurance today and you have access to health care, because there's a mandate in Massachusetts, right, through your spouse or through some other circumstance, and you provide proof of alternative insurance elsewhere and you leave, we will pay you a bonus to leave our pool because it is so costly to keep people insured. And so those have been very successful. Due to this coming year for the first time, we're expanding that to the retirees on active plans. So our workforce is unique because police, fire, teachers, many of them can reach their full retirement benefit and their pension before 65. And so there's folks who retire but don't have access to Medicare, and so they still have access to active plans. And those plans are costly. And I'm not begrudging them. That's the benefits package they have access to. But this year we will be expanding the opt-out and the incentive program to those folks as well, to see if we could, have folks take a second look at different plans. And of course, if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for them. No one's being compelled to change their insurance, because obviously that's a very personal choice. But we'll be expanding that this year in hopes of being able to actualize some savings too at a time where our budget's just exploding.
Okay. You ready for questions?
Sure.
Jamie, you want to start with you?
Just so everybody, because you probably know better now, what's driven, because this is two years in the making, 18 months in the making, what is driving, and we don't see an end in sight, really, what overall national, what's driving this?
I'm going to have Sue come up and answer most of that, but I can, yes, if Sue, you want to come to the microphone. But one of the things that GIC publishes their meeting materials, and they've identified the proliferation of GLP-1 medications, other more costly medications. I believe there's providers that are raising rates. There's a whole confluence of events that are nearly universally not in our favor. But Sue, could you just touch on?
Prefer to sit?
Can you, one of you?
No, I'm fine.
You're good. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't want to come hang out up here?
I'm good. I don't have a voice, so I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Just to reiterate what Connor said, I've been doing this for 38 years. It's like the worst I've ever seen it. Costs are just going through the roof. Am I speaking into this?
Yeah, it's
Is
not
it
it's not amplified.
It just gets picked up for cable.
Got it. Okay. Costs are going through the roof. There's so many reasons. There's been a consolidation in the market of providers. So there's fewer and fewer providers out there, particularly ones who want to do business with municipalities, unfortunately. You have an older population, which is higher risk and more costly. The carriers that are still around are having more difficult times negotiating contracts with providers. Providers are seeing increased costs, having to hire traveling nurses, for example, having trouble staffing. So the carriers are having to give higher reimbursement rates. As rates for Medicaid, Medicare reimbursements go down, the providers are looking for increased reimbursements on the commercial plans. Drugs, specialty drugs. We're so fortunate to have them. They're very costly. The diabetes drugs that are being used for weight loss, the GLP-1s, from last year to this year, we saw those costs triple. They're starting to look at using those drugs for other diagnoses, such as addiction, which again, it's great, but it's costly. Aging population. So all of these factors combined, it's just the perfect storm right now. And as Connor said, doesn't matter if you're in the GIC. If you have your own health plan, or if a town has their own health plan, or if you're in Maya, which is the insurance arm of the MMA, costs are just through the roof. We don't think this is a one-off. We expect to continue to see these increases for at least the next several years.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, and thanks for speaking, knowing without a voice. Thank you, and that's a lot. And I know there's a lot of talk now about insurance providers not, or insurance companies not covering some of these drugs, right? That coming up with, you know, in the, at least in the short term, while there aren't enough or there isn't a generic option or something less costly available. So, but to your point, we're probably years away from starting to see reductions, just based, and that's one factor. The aging population's another one not completely out of our control, and so it's really tough, especially right now for everybody that's with all the other fluctuation and lack of consistency day to day. This is a tough one.
My question was actually answered because I was thinking about the forward-looking situation as, you know, thinking specifically, hearing about possible changes to Medicare, Medicaid, how that trickles down to states and municipalities and all of us.
Right.
It affects insurance everywhere. So it sounds like this is one of the factors that is probably being looked at and will probably be a big driver and major uncertainty over the coming years. So there's really no question. They're just kind of building on things. Connor, it's safe to assume that the numbers here are ranges are all within what you typically would see at municipalities, like other municipalities across the Commonwealth.
Yes, so there's a range. Communities can go as low as 50-50.
Okay.
There are communities that still maintain 75-25. I think there might be a couple who are slightly better than that, but those are outliers. 75-25 is relatively typical. There's an array of it in the area. There's folks throughout the county who are already at 50-50.
Okay.
There's folks at 60-40 or 70-30. So it doesn't put us in a situation that's completely outside the norm of what other employers have, but it is no questions about it. It is a material decrease in the benefit on a go-forward basis. The retiree rep made a very good point of, you know, the impact it could have on retention, and that's fair. I don't want to mislead you or our employees that somehow, you know, going down is not going down. It is. I think to your point, and it's frustrating and it's difficult because there's all these other uncertainties and people are worried about other boots that may drop from a federal level that we don't have control over. But I still think it's for the right path to, you know, this is graduated, it can be revisited. It doesn't go all the way to 50-50 right out of the gate, right? So I think that's that middle ground. But not that you suggested this, Jen, but, you know, folks might think, well, gee, there's so much volatility, can't we kind of shelve this and wait until later? And the risk we run there is by not making gradual changes, if the situation continues to deteriorate, we may be forced to make more dramatic ones.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it's difficult. I mean, we're all feeling it every, you know, our own insurance for my family has gone up every year, the past couple of years in significant ways. It's hitting us all. I think it's really important and notable that, you know, that the mindfulness around existing retirees not being impacted. Because I had a family member who had this happen, worked for a state agency, and they actually changed it on retired individuals, and that was horrible. Someone who was many years into retirement.
Right. I mean, if you're on a fixed income, I mean, shifting these, and I think when people look at these, they say, okay, well, what's the big deal? You're going from an employee paying 25 to an employee paying 30, but that's not actually a 5% increase. That's a 20% increase, right? Because if your share is 25% and you're going to 30, that's increasing it by a fifth.
Yeah.
Right. So we tried to balance the kind of conflicting and borderline impossible things of doing, you know, trying to not destabilize the situation for our workers without, I mean, frankly, I don't see how we can not have conversations around things like this when we're in the financial circumstances we're in.
Yeah, no, it's critical we do, unfortunately.
I am actually going to have to recuse myself from this, the discussion and sort of vote. For full transparency, I have a family member who is an employee of the town, and this will have a financial impact on me. So.
Appreciate that, Mark. Number one, I think that this is very thoughtful. But I want to pick up on something that Sue said about one of the issues that's going on in healthcare across this country now is the coverage, lack of coverage, lack of nurses, doctors. We have doctors in this town who have retired, and their patients are looking desperately for new physicians. Finding a primary care physician now is very, very difficult. And so it makes me understand why costs are going up. I think this is a very thoughtful response to that, and I appreciate the work you put into it.
Thank you.
I agree. We've talked about this for the past couple of years, just that it is something that we could look at. We've tried not to do that, so getting here has been not a surprise, but not something we've enjoyed getting to either. And I just want to say that I really think that the thoughtfulness of that committee with all the representatives from the unions and the retirees, you know, how great that you're able to sit down and have a conversation and thoughtfully work that through. So I appreciate that there'll have to be a concession there. And
There won't have to be clear. If the desire is to request through me to the board that this vote tonight be adjusted in some way, then yes, there would need to be. But
right.
the alternative is this just proceeds.
Yep. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll just get right to the motion. Craig, you see that written in your packet.
I move to reduce the employer's share of health insurance premiums for retirees based on date of retirement specifically. Retirees who retire between January 1, 2026 and December 31st, 2026 shall contribute 30%, and the employer shall contribute 70%, and retirees who retire on or after January 1st, 2027 shall contribute 40%, and the employer shall contribute 60%. This vote is contingent upon the existing active health insurance contributions remaining at the status quo, and the board will revisit and potentially adjust, roll back, delay, or rescind the retiree adjustments voted tonight if and when active plan shifts may be agreed upon by the town and school unions, provided such adjustments to active plans yield budget savings.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for a motion in a second, and then because we're going to have a recusal, I'll just do a roll call vote just to make it clear. So Craig made the motion. Does anyone want a second? So that's Bodger and Stacy. And we'll start with you, Jamie.
Stebbins, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Full Janetti, yes.
Barger, yes.
And Lamb is recused.
Thank you all.
All right. Moving on to the discussion and vote, accept Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 32B, Section 19, to establish a public employee committee for the purposes of negotiating health insurance.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. As we just talked about on the previous item, our labor leaders indicated a willingness to have this conversation around active healthcare rates as it pertains to potentially delaying the retiree changes we have made. To do so, the board must adopt Section 19 of Mass General Law, Chapter 32B. Most local acceptances are by town meeting. 32B specifically carves out and calls out that the select board are the accepting authority for this item. That's been reviewed by our advisors at Cook & Company, as well as our attorneys at Mead, Tallerman and Costa. Attorney Castro is with MTC, is here tonight if there's any legal questions for the board. By voting to adopt Section 19, you would recreate a PEC, which is a Public Employees Committee that can engage in what's called coalition bargaining over health insurance rates. The unions are given a weighted vote based on a number of health insurance eligible employees represented by each union. The retiree representative receives 10% of the weighted vote. And to reach an agreement and change premium splits that bind all parties, the majority of the weighted votes would have to agree to do so. So it creates a way for all, because this is a pretty large group of folks to be negotiating with, impacting 1,000 people. So thankfully the state has this provision of law. Although I'm not certain, it would probably largely mirror the membership of the IAC. I would imagine Attorney Castro that each union has a right to select their own representative to the PEC, and other than that, we'll be getting to meeting shortly. The IAC is meeting in a week on Monday. I'll bring this up with them, and the recommendation I have from the board is for you to adopt Section 19 to formalize the PEC and this negotiating process and condition that acceptance that this runs no later than April 18th. And the reason for that deadline is because if we are going to reach an agreement, it needs to be in time for balancing the budget, and this would give us time to adjust our budget accordingly before town meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any. And again, there's a prepared motion in your packet.
Any questions, Jamie?
None.
Jen?
No.
Craig? No? Okay.
Anything that our attorney wants to say, or?
No. I mean, Connor was correct in everything you said, both with respect to this agenda item and the agenda item before. It's coalition bargaining. You're creating a new PEC by adopting this section. And they select their own members, and there's also the retiree member that's selected by the retirement that's selected as well. First meeting, anyone, just so you know, first meeting of this PEC, the town can call it if it wants. Either the PEC or the town can call it, but the town can, as long as you give 7 days notice, if you want to move things along. But aside from that, nothing else here unless someone has some questions.
Okay.
Okay, I move to accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 32B, Section 19, to establish a public employee committee, said acceptance to be conditioned on the town and the PEC agreeing on the town's new health insurance contribution rates no later than April 18th, 2025.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Stacy. And start with you, Jamie.
Stebbins, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Full Janetti, yes.
Barger, yes.
And Lamb recuse.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Attorney Castro.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 5, discussion and vote. Is that where we're at? Or did I skip
Item
one?
4, sorry.
I'm
One
sorry,
More, one
yeah.
more healthcare item.
Discussion amending OPEB policies, annual required contributions from operating budgets.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. As the board is aware, the town maintains a variety of financial management guidelines and fund balance policies. Many of these were adopted in the middle of the last decade when we last attempted an override. The former recommends that the town make annual contributions to our OPEB trust fund. We have budgeted $25,000 annually, which will likely be cut going into fiscal 26 given the severity of the budget deficit. That is not a sufficient amount, and given the conversation we're having and the extraordinary increases in healthcare costs, I recommend that we consider expanding those OPEB policies and the approach. I didn't want to be presumptuous and draft an entire amendment to kind of core financial policy, so I wanted to just bring it up to the board to consider. One approach that I have seen in at least one other municipality, but I think is a creative and beneficial way to tackle OPEB, and a lot of this is also inspired by PACE. When we talk about our operating budget, and people say, well, how much is the schools, how much is the town? We talk about the operations, but fixed costs are kind of over here. We always identify it, but fixed costs are 30% of our budget at this point. It's this kind of amorphous thing over here that feels, by its categorization, separate and apart from our operating costs. And some of them truly are, right? Regional assessment stuff we have no control over. But the healthcare costs and the OPEB costs that we carry and fixed costs are obviously directly tied to the size of our workforce, who we're employing, et cetera. And so I've seen other communities do what's called an annual required contribution for any new hires. So again, it would be forward-facing, including replacement of folks who are retiring. That in the actual salary of a personnel budget that we carry, that typically has salary, overtime, et cetera, that those as the workforce turns over, that you also include an annual required contribution in that departmental operating budget, so that there is a more direct line between the hiring in this department and the long-term financial liabilities. That will obviously, depending on what number we select for the ARC, have an impact on the ability of departments. Typically when you have a more senior employee retire, tenured employee, forgive me, retire at a higher salary scale, and you bring in a newer employee, there's some savings there. And what this does is before those savings are reallocated back out to any number of unfunded programmatic needs or unfunded mandates we have to deal with, is it would force a certain amount to be budgeted for the OPEB trust.
And that would be held in like a separate little savings account kind of a thing?
So it
or
would be
a-
put in the annual operating budget, and my understanding from communicating with these other communities is that at the end of the year, they do a transfer out of that into the existing OPEB trust that we do have. And the OPEB trust was established by the town through town meeting. Those funds can only be used for retiree healthcare costs. So it's like a very specialized stabilization fund that can't be used for something else. So I don't have a written policy for you, but I wanted to float the concept to the board and get your temperature, and if you're interested in this. I think something to this effect is appropriate, given you've now made votes that impact future retiree rates. We are going to actively be discussing active rates with our employees. I think this, if nothing else, is a good faith gesture, but we're also looking at imposing more constraints on our already extremely constrained operating budget.
Right, but I think the opportunity to do it, when you're bringing on somebody new at a lower amount,
Oh yes, that's
that's the only way you can do it, really.
Well, correct, because otherwise, if you implemented this effective immediately, you would be giving a $1 million bill to
Right.
departments who can't fund their existing operation already.
But when we make decisions, we're making decisions based on the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50
right.
years, right? So if we don't do something like this, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road to the people that are sitting in these seats in 10 years.
That's
and
right.
leaving these hard decisions for somebody else.
Probably with another zero on it.
Right.
Right.
It's the only time I've been able to speak all night. Go ahead.
No.
Like nothing.
Well, I got something, but you really want to talk, so.
I think it's necessary. How can we not explore something like this? We know we're facing this massive problem, and we don't have any real immediate long-term solutions. This is a way to do it, and
You have to get the
it's
storm window too, sorry.
it's exploratory. You haven't presented us with anything. You're researching it and seeing, what
Correct,
can we...
I could bring you a policy in the next couple of meetings.
Yeah. So no, I think it's necessary.
Connor, is there a policy or like a thought process around the use of the trust? I know it hasn't been an issue because there's like the amount of money in there is not meaningful, but as the OPEB trust grows, is there a policy around how that money would be used to offset the costs of?
I believe there is. I'm looking to the finance director. We have not, there's, I think, what is it, 400 in there?
Yeah, it's about 400.
So we have not had a sufficient balance to
23,000.
draw on it, but I believe the trust has set standards for its distribution towards these costs.
Yeah, I mean, the plan is just to accumulate money in that trust, basically until your OPEB liability is fully funded, and we are a very long way off from that.
Okay, so you can't draw until the liability is fully.
I'm not saying we couldn't draw, but
Yeah, no, let's be, Wendy and I have a professional disagreement on some things like this, because then we would literally never draw on it, and I don't want our employees thinking that, because it's a 9-digit number.
yeah, I would strenuously object to
That's fine.
making any withdrawals from that.
I actually really appreciate this because I do some budgeting stuff and it's like the conservative versus.
Yes,
the
well,
liberal.
that's,
Yep,
I mean, Wendy
I
is the
totally
accountant,
understand.
and that she is an excellent accountant for the town and keeps everyone in check. I just want to, so yes, so from an accounting perspective, you don't want to, right? You want to net out and eliminate those long-term liabilities.
Right, and I mean, eventually, if you had enough money in that account, then you could use earnings on an annual basis to help offset your liability.
Okay, that'd be the ideal situation, so it's that point.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to check. So otherwise, I think this is, the right thing to do and explore. So I'm looking forward to hearing findings. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I concur. I think it's, it's something we need to do.
All right.
Okay, I will bring something back for your consideration. Thank you.
So you don't need a vote on this. This was just discussion.
No, your consensus is
Okay.
sufficient. Thank you.
All right. Item 5, discussion and vote, increase the income limit for senior tax work-off program.
Hi, Chris.
Tonight, I wanted to discuss with you guys the possibility of increasing what has typically been the financial income driver for the senior tax work-off program. This is coming out of feedback that I got at the recent PACE open house. And speaking with a number of individuals who are looking at some of the programs that we do offer. This one going back to 2000, so we've been actually operating this program now for 25 years. And it's a great program. There are currently 25 spots that are open annually to seniors. The statute sets the age at 60. The statute sets that they can work up to 125 hours at the current minimum wage, doing a service to the town. So that the employment, they actually have to do something that benefits the town. Historically, when the program was established, the decision was made to use 400% over, above the poverty level. In speaking to a lot of the people that I spoke to at the PACE open house, that number was kind of on the low side. For an individual household, it's around $60,000. For a married couple, it's 81 and change. The people I was speaking to kind of fell just above that, but still weren't in a significantly comfortable position that any change in their property tax could easily be absorbed. So I went back and I looked at some of the other programs that we're using, and we're using 80% of median income for SERVE and for the tax credit. What I would propose is that we switch and be consistent across the board and use that income limit, which will raise it to almost $73,000 for an individual household and $83,300 for a two-person household. This change doesn't impact the commitment on the town's part financially because those spots exist. And the 125 hours exists, and the $15 an hour exists. That's the number that we budget from as potential impact for this program. We currently, though, do have openings. We have at least 5 openings that are not filled right now, and we're halfway through the program. So if the board is agreeable to raising it and making it consistent across the board, we would undertake advertising, changing of the websites, getting the word out immediately tomorrow. And what I would propose is that we would accept applications through next Friday, the 21st. And if the number of applicants that qualify exceeds the open spaces, we'd hold the lottery, and then we'd immediately move forward with getting those people placed into positions where they could start accruing this tax credit.
I think that's great.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Yep.
Just say it's reasonable and meaningful, right? Because that is a big potential threshold, like you said, and some folks that are just falling just shy of it, that's a big deal. Now, does it help everybody? No. And there will be people that continue to fall just shy of it, but this is a nice, meaningful step.
It is, and we did have 3 people that applied for the program this year that did miss the cutoff that now would potentially be able to participate in the program.
That's great.
Kristen, if,
Oh, go ahead.
if someone accepted a slot but did not follow through on the hours, what would that look like in terms of opening up the opportunity to someone else?
So it would involve conversation with the individual and finding out what is barring them.
Okay.
There is a process within the statute that the town did adopt after 2000 that does allow for work by proxy. So if the reason they're not completing their hours is because they are physically or medically incapable of doing it, there is a process where we can have a proxy completed and attested to. And we're very, very fortunate in our community that we have a number of people that participate in this program, as well as just straight up volunteers who donate their extra hours. And we are at times able to allocate those across to somebody who is by proxy. More so, we do have a couple of people who have applied, have accepted, but really aren't moving forward. We don't have a methodology in place really for saying, other than asking, are you willing to give up your slot? We also do have a parallel program that runs for veterans. There is no income, no age on that. One thing I did hear at PACE that some people were not aware of is that program automatically, actually, I shouldn't say automatically, because the town actually went to town meeting and adopted another piece of legislation that allows for that program to be accessed by surviving spouses. which a few of the people I spoke to did not realize. So hopefully we have a couple out openings in that side of the house as well. So total, there's 40 positions that the town offers.
Great, thank you.
How long ago, I think you mentioned this, but how long ago was 60,000 for a single income established?
That's what we're using right now, which is 400% above
Federal poverty line.
federal poverty
When
level.
was it established?
It's established every year. Oh, from the onset of the
Yeah,
program.
when did
So in
60
2000, when the town laid out
Okay.
their program, they decided that they would use that marker.
So in 25 years, we haven't changed that dollar.
Correct.
So
We haven't changed.
Things have dramatically increased in costs, and this is a 20% increase from 60 to 73, which is at the very least,
And it brings it
it's still
local.
behind, but it's at the very least trying to bring it up.
And it brings it to local Northeast standards.
Correct.
400%
That's
of
what's
poverty
important.
level
Yeah.
across the country is a significantly different number than 80% of the income in Easton.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you vote it, and I would recommend you vote with percentiles and not the dollar amounts, because the AMI is updated regularly because of the standards that are used in 40B, and that we have begun adopting in basically since the pandemic with Kristen's department and other departments, specifically for your point, Mark, to make sure we're broadening the umbrella of folks who can qualify, because there's folks, so many who are over. Just over, these are not sliding scales, right? If you're 1% over, you don't get, the benefit minus 1%, you get nothing. And that's very frustrating and difficult for people. And so 80% AMI, it also goes, it goes above a 2-person household, I believe, yes?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So it
Those are
scales
just
with the number of
numbers I
people in the
pulled.
house, and it will grow every year.
Excellent, great.
Craig?
I'm all set.
I just wanted to clarify one thing that comes up as a question from time to time. This has to be for jobs that you would have to pay someone for, not for I serve on a committee and no one gets paid on that committee. It's not that kind of volunteer work, right?
Correct. It would be and now it's not necessarily a job that we would fund.
Right.
Some of these positions, we have individuals who fill gaps, come in and dust in town hall. We have people who come in and do help with mailings. There are people that work within the town clerk's office that help with different functions. We have individuals who may have an affinity for a board or committee that we're able to find a way to allow them to support that committee's mission.
Yeah.
But it is definitely something that is in service to the town.
Okay. I'm surprised to hear that there's been some instances where someone got the slot and didn't use it while we're making changes now. Is that a change the board would make, or a change that you would make as a what's the word I'm thinking of? Regulation kind of a change?
I think it's management policy. I think it's something that we do definitely need to look at, especially in these times where, and implementing into our process where X number of months into the program, somebody has not taken a job assignment. We have people that we have offered job assignments to. It's been a recent conversation too, that we've had people we've offered assignments to who just are not, no, I don't like that. Call me when you have something else. And
Yeah.
at some point, in order to give the benefit to the maximum number of individuals who are willing to participate in the program actively is something we're going to have to look at.
So is that something that we would vote on, or?
I don't think so. I think it's
Okay.
something as a management.
Great.
This is more impactful, and I felt appropriate for you all
Yeah.
to know about and to
Okay.
be a part of.
Yeah, because I'd hate to see that, more people are probably going to be looking towards that now, right? So, all right. Well, I'm enthusiastic about it, and I think it's great that we heard that from people at PACE. That's what we're looking for, is people to have constructive ideas and suggestions, and for you to act on that and move this forward. I appreciate that. Awesome. All right, Craig?
So I move to increase the income limit for the senior tax work-off program to 80% of the area median income.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Great,
Kristen.
thank you, Kristen. All right, item 6, presentation with Easton Community Access Television, otherwise known as ECAT, for your annual report. Come on up. How's it feel to be on this side of the camera?
Just be careful of the cords. Then you can just advance from the right now.
I can.
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's been going on at ECAT for the past year.
Do you want to just introduce yourself first for
Oh,
people at
sure.
home that don't know you yet?
Yeah, so my name's Kim Pincus. I'm the executive director for ECAT, Easton Community Access Television. This is our mission to develop and produce educational, cultural, and informational community programming for the town of Easton, and to provide an electronic forum for the free exchange of information and ideas which reflect the talent, interests, concerns, and diversity of Easton residents. I just have a little bit of a breakdown of, this is the full-time staff. And a little bit of what we do, and they do a great job. I mean, I think probably most people have seen Adam and Joe around town, and then we also have some great part-time staff that I think people have seen as well. I did a breakdown of the programming by channel. Most of the numbers are similar, but we did have more content on the education channel than we did last year. So for anyone who doesn't know, the public channel is any community events, any resident-produced programming, anything local businesses have going on. Education is anything from the schools, and government is government meetings and anything related like that. So our increase in education, I think, came from doing a little bit more with Southeastern Regional than we have in past years. Some more games, like sports games, and some more content from the schools that's not directly just covering things. So we had some like PSAs from the middle school, and then some like interviews with different staff at the OA. We don't get Nielsen ratings, so we can't say how many people are watching the channels, but we can say how many people are watching online. So we did have a 22% increase in viewership in 2024 over 2023, and then a 69% increase in hours watched. So more people are engaging with the content than in the past.
And that's just from the PACE meetings.
Yeah, those
Sorry, I
have been
couldn't
popular.
resist.
And then these are the other sites that we're active on. We do a lot of live streaming on Facebook and a lot of promoting of different events, ours and community events. Our website has all 4 channels live streamed, so even if you don't have cable, you can still see anything that we're doing. And all of the programming is available on the website and on YouTube. And then we share some of what we do with other towns as well, so that's through Connect. And if you want to see stuff going all the way back, our stuff goes all the way back to 2010, and then we also have some stuff from when Comcast ran the channel. So that's all available on archive.org. And then these are the areas that we thought were notable for this year. And I'll break them down a little bit further. So for student involvement, we have the Hockomock Film Festival. That's our annual film festival for high school students in the Hockomock Sports League. So they can either be attending school in the Hockomock Sports League or residing in the towns. We had 65 entries last year, so that's our highest number of entries. And the film festival, we took it over in 2018, but it's I think 22 years old this year.
Yep.
We also this year got some interns from the OA Foundation's transition program. So they come in every Thursday from 10 to 1:30, and they're learning, different skills, and we're working with them. So they do editing and recording of shows and that sort of thing. And then Easton's Got Talent is a show we have in the summer, and that is run by a parent and her daughter, who I think is just moving up to the high school this year.
Great.
And then below that, I have a list of some of the new resident-produced shows. So these are all shows that Easton residents came to us because they were interested in doing. And all of these are, most of these are monthly. Downsize Me is a documentary, but most of these are monthly shows. We also have some new shows with local businesses. So this year we have Auntie Zaza's Fireside Chats and Cooking with Claudia, which are both new. We've increased our coverage of the Chamber of Commerce, so we're doing all the ribbon cuttings and events that they have. We were already doing the Business Appreciation Night. And then the library, we also work with regularly historically, but this year they started a new program where at the beginning of every month, they do a show to discuss everything that they're doing for the month. So that's a pretty helpful one. And then there's a list of the government meetings we covered this past year that we hadn't been covering before. And we also did interviews with all of the second governor's council district candidates. So that was a useful one too. And that actually, a lot of other towns chose to take that one too and air it. And then we have a weekly news program. That's not new, but I still think it's noteworthy. It's a 30-minute news program every week with different stories and events going on and the sports highlights, weather, and we have a pet of the week with APCSM. We had ECAT Day this year. So we did at Oak Sam's Memorial Hall, we had a full day of performances and demonstrations, and that was kind of a new event for us, and I think the event itself went really well. We're going to look to try to get higher attendance next year, but overall, I think it was a good event. And then Expedition Easton was filmed last year and aired this year, and that was, Joe Taft came up with that show. But it was a really good one, both because it's very well produced and also because it's like The Amazing Race, but just in Easton. So it got a lot of different locations around town involved. And it also gave us an opportunity to donate to some local charities.
And you made donations to those?
Yeah,
platforms,
so
or-
there were teams who competed, and if you won the leg of the race, then your team would get a small amount of money and your charity that you were running for.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we also have our film sprint. So that is our film festival that's for all ages. And basically you get a theme out of a hat and a randomly assigned prop, and you have 48 hours to make a film. So that's a fun one to give people, an opportunity to be creative. And I already mentioned the Hockomock Film Festival. Last year was the first year that Southeastern won, and it was the first year that King Philip entered.
Great. We should do the film sprint as a board. That would be fun. I mean, we don't have enough pressure, so.
Yeah, so we have some opportunities for classes. Anybody who wants to learn any aspect of media can always have a one-on-one class. We're very open to that. We have different people take us up on that. One of the residents, Neil Anderson, who's done that, he came out with his documentary this past year. And we have another resident who's working on their own documentary about the Bridgewater Triangle. So that should be coming out, in the not too distant future. Hope comes in bi-weekly to do their own sort of internal news program. We have our filmmaking workshops, so every February and April, that's open to any middle school age students. It's completely free. It's held by the OA media teacher, and they get a chance to make their own short films. So one thing I did want to bring up is that there is a bill right now to have community television have some support through streaming. You know, cable revenue goes down every year, so our revenue goes down every year. And this bill would help bring us up to at least a few years ago. So we'd get back to a better level, because where things are going, we're going to have to start making cuts in the not too distant future to what we do. So we were hoping that the select board might be willing to reach out to legislators to say that you support this bill.
So is that bill to start taxing the streaming, or is it already being taxed and to get some of the revenue that's being taxed?
It's a fee. It's not a
A fee,
tax. Yeah. So it's the same idea as what Comcast and Verizon have, except it would be through streaming. And it would only affect streaming providers who I think bring in over 250,000.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that.
Thank you. All right. Is there anything else?
Why don't we start with you, Jen?
No questions, just it's always incredible seeing the amount of work that ECAT is able to do with such a small full-time crew and a crew of part-time folks. So, you know, hats off, great work.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, but I should mention, we've been increasing our attempts to get sponsorships and grants. So I do want to thank all the businesses and organizations that have helped us with sponsorships.
Excellent.
Much in the same vein, you guys do a great job. You have great employees.
Thank you.
Super attentive to every event, and it seems every year you're constantly improving, increasing, pushing the boundaries. So I thank you.
Thanks.
I think you do a very good job, Kim, and I'm very excited to see all the different and new things that you're doing. I'm on the Tricentennial Committee, and Joe's always there with his, well in advance, making sure that everything's all set up so that, so I appreciate that too.
Yeah, and we will be at all the Tricentennial events.
Jamie, did you want to make any comments?
Just thank you, Kim. It's
you.
amazing when we look at the number of hours and all the work that the team does and the quality of the work. And I'll tell you that this is a pretty neat story, but on Friday night, we had a packed house at Oliver Ames, and I got in line, and it was completely sold out. We had 1,000 people in the gymnasium, so my son and I, along with a lot of other families that get turned around, went and watched on ECAT, and it was fantastic, because it was actually better than being jam-packed like a sardine in the gym, and we got to see the entire coverage of the OA boys win in the Elite Eight, and they're playing in the Elite, or in the Final Four tonight at UMass Boston, where a couple of my kids have been shuttled up there. So thank you very much for all the
Thank
work
you.
you and the team.
Thanks.
So I just made a couple of notes. When I read through your packet, there were certain instances in there where you were talking about the things that you do with people of disabilities and different abilities. So some of your interns use the House of Possibilities, having that relationship to work with them is really amazing. So
Yeah,
I'm really happy to hear that. I think that that's really meaningful.
Yeah, and the OA Foundations program, I think, is a really good one, too.
Yeah. And you also made mention that one of the things that you're going to be trying to do in the upcoming years is to close caption all of the events that are on there, which I know I sit with the Commission on Disabilities, and I know that's been something that they've been really excited to hear about. So that will be a big difference. And also just to give a shout out, that town meeting, you can use your own devices to see the closed captioning on that. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
So if you were watching it on YouTube on your phone, YouTube would show.
Right, and we do have for, major meetings, you can have closed captioning on Comcast and Verizon as well.
Right. And for a town meeting, if you are hearing impaired, you can request in advance to get a listening device that will help you if you go in person in the auditorium. So just to remind people about that.
Right, that's set up in Town Hall, and then we do have a portable one, too. So if somebody needed it at a different meeting, we do have the ability to provide it.
Okay, awesome. And fundraising, I know that you sell your little tiger cubs at some of the events that we have. When we do the cultural district, you guys have tables at that. Are there other opportunities for people in the community that might want to, not necessarily a sponsorship, but is there other ways
Yeah.
people can contribute?
Yeah, so we also have a water program, and we're looking to market that one better. But if you do the like water dispensers, we have a program where 75 cents of your payment goes to ECAT. It's in collaboration with Royalty Beverage.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everything that you're doing, and ECAT's everywhere and at every event, and it looks like they're having a great time at the things I see them at that are usually concerts or fun events like that. Maybe not so much some of our government events, but they do comment on some of the things that we're doing, in these meetings. So that makes me happy that, they're watching it and understanding it and appreciating it as well. You've done such a great job since you've taken over the role of executive director, and I just, even being here in a timely manner to give us this information every year, you've made a lot of big changes there, the website, all these other things that we've talked about. So I just want to thank you for that. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
I want to add too, to say thanks to you as the leader of the organization, but also your staff. I know we jokingly in my department called Joe the 20th honorary 20th member of PACE. So those meetings are so long. He has such a good attitude and is just so so I'm not trying to shill for Joe here, but
No, he does a great job.
Please keep Joe. He's just, and all of you have amazing employees throughout ECAT.
Yeah, we do.
I don't want anyone who works there to feel left out,
But Joe really is paying attention, because sometimes we have to ask a question, and it's not like
he's just
watching something else on his phone.
right.
He's
So
really
he,
listening
He
in.
has put in so many hours covering PACE. I mean, those are long meetings, and so kudos to your staff.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
All right, next we are looking at contract award PCD 2025-07, the Center for Resilient Metro Regions, consulting services for permitting process review and analysis.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. As the board may recall, at a previous meeting, you accepted a $40,000 grant that the town won to bring folks on board to do a review of our administrative practices relating to permitting across a variety of our boards, zoning, conservation, planning, Board of Health, building, et cetera, to give us actionable feedback on making sure we're doing the best we can to streamline our permitting and reduce permitting delays. As we're all acutely tuned into right now with the budget situation, new growth has been one of the only reasons we've made it this far without an override. That's taken sewer investment, which the next few items relate to, but it's also taking moving to online permitting and trying to make sure we're doing the right thing by the regs and bylaws adopted by this community to give businesses some predictability and reliability. And right now, with the cost of interest, the volatility of the market, anything we can do to help reduce unknowns and reduce risk is good. We want people to be able to come in. We have regulations. I won't, some of them can be rather tough, but we want to make sure that they're being applied consistently, effectively, predictably, and reliably, so that folks can get in, get out, and get shovels in the ground. So we have paused a variety of strategic grants that are much more longer term. I carved out for things that are relating to economic development and growth because we do need to continue to keep the foot on the pedal there. So this is the contract to bring a center on board to do that work. And again, it's grant funded.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
Thank you for the grant.
And thank you to Director Danielson and her staff.
And, it's a lot of money, so I'm glad it is coming from a grant. And it's necessary. I do think we need to improve our processes, refine them, more user-friendly, all that good stuff. So to have this done at no additional cost to the town because of your hard work is fantastic.
I think every time that we have something like this come before us, we should highlight that it's a grant.
Yeah.
And thanks to our staff for producing the material that got us these grants. It doesn't cost the taxpayer money, and it accomplishes a goal that we think is very important. So Stephanie and folks, thank you very much for doing that work.
And I want to add that these are competitive grants.
Yeah.
So one of the things that makes these happen also is that Easton has a really good reputation of taking the grants, using them, getting them done, and producing output, and then making decisions based off it. These grants don't produce reports that just sit on a shelf. And I also just want to recognize that there's a lot of hard work getting the grant, writing the grant, but also when we get the grant, it's going to be a lot of work for that department also, because consultants don't just come in and magically produce a report. It's a lot of staff time invested in working with them to get that report out. So I want to thank you for the work you're going to be doing on that as well.
I guess I'll just pile on and reiterate what was in the budget update last time, because when budgets are tight, folks often look to administrative departments and jobs. And as we know, our general government operations spends close to the bottom per resident in all of Massachusetts. We do not have grant writers on staff. Stephanie's department, in the past 5 years on average, has brought in $3.40 of state and federal competitive grants for every $1 we spend on them. So that I don't think can be repeated enough.
Well, that's huge, because that question has come up a lot. Why doesn't the town hire a grant writer? And that would be able to get us more grants.
We've been shut off from certain grant programs from winning too much money from them.
Right.
Not to say we can't continue doing more, but that we aggressively pursue grants. Our current team has brought in more than $60 million in state and federal funds in the past.
Strategy to exist and survive.
Correct. We've had no choice.
Yeah.
Again, wouldn't have made it this far.
And also being selective about the grants that we do choose to go after, because if they're not going to be something that's really going to generate some kind of future efficiencies or revenues, it's just not worth it to take every grant because they are a lot of work. So we get a lot of bang for the buck out of the ones that we do go after and win. And we have a really high success record of winning.
We do. Frankly, one of the reasons we had to pause some of the strategic grants because we won so many of them in the current year. Now that we've frozen hiring in a lot of departments and are substantially understaffed right now compared to even our normal standard, we just can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's our focus will be on the economic development oriented, because we need those, to Mark's point, we have need of those to survive.
And just so people know, when a committee is formed, like, say the master planning committee or the energy committee, or, grants fund that work, but a staff person has to staff that too. And, whether it's somebody taking minutes or whether it's somebody like Sean who's doing something afterwards, or Stephanie coming to these are on top of their regular jobs. So it's a tremendous strain on the resources that we have, in my opinion. And I just think that people should know that, because everybody goes over and above and puts a lot of extra hours into these. And when you have something and it's a one-off, maybe that's, a little bit easier to manage. But we do so many of them, it's starting to become routine where people are used to just putting in all those extra hours. And I just don't think that's great either.
Thank you.
So I move to approve the contract PCD 2025-07, Center for Resilient Metro Regions Consulting Services for Permitting Process Review and Analysis, in the amount of $37,000.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Terrific. Next, the vote to authorize the town administrator to accept $300,000 in MBTA Communities Catalyst Grant.
Sure, I will ask Director Danielson to take a seat up here with us in the event I'm getting any of the details wrong with zoning or the grant, to jump in. But obviously on subject, this is a grant award the town is receiving. Easton voters adopted zoning, I believe in May of 2024, compliant with the state MBTA communities mandate. We were one of the earlier adopters in our cohort of adjacent communities. There was a press release, I think last year, that we were in a small group of, 30 some odd communities who would have access to this new state grant program that was very, very specific to funds to catalyze, hence the word, the name, infrastructure growth. so that housing in the areas that have been zoned for it could be built. So there's a few really important things I want to touch on here. First of all, it's a $300,000 grant from the state. Again, this is not local tax dollars going to this. This would cover the design and the construction administration costs associated with an extension of the Queesit Sewer District, which we built in 2017. That goes from Queesit Commons down 138 to Fabrook, and goes down a small portion today of Belmont Street. So this would extend it. This would fund the design and construction administration to extend the sewer on Belmont to give access to parcels that are currently within the Belmont Street Community Housing Subdistrict, to allow those parcels to be combined and redeveloped into, I believe, Stephanie,
Three
three
buildings. And since Wayne submitted the notes to you,
Yes.
I talked with the developer, and they're looking at least 61 units of housing.
Sure. When under that zoning, I believe there's a 10% affordability requirement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Stephanie, so that we don't end up harming other state mandates and town policy goals of the 10% affordability requirement of our housing stock. When the planning board was going through a very thorough public process to lay out the zones that would comply with MBTA zoning, there are 3 zones. One is functionally an overlay on top of existing multifamily housing on Foundry, or more accurately, Robert Drive.
Yeah.
The other is up at Roach Brothers Plaza, where if there is ever a train extension, the MBTA in the past had proposed a station there. And this was the third one that was identified as having some potential. And so, again, this grant fund would cover the cost for the town to contract with an engineering firm to produce plans, oversee construction. And the important piece here is, and you've heard this a lot, particularly of recent news, is that this isn't the town committing that we will build more sewer. This is a grant from the state recognizing that we followed this law early that would cover the design and oversight, but the cost of building the actual sewer extension would be borne by the developer, not by the public, not by taxpayers. So if anyone's following along with this, I would just want that to be very clear. That they would also be subject to a privilege fee for their capacity, subject to your regulations, including netting out perhaps some of that construction cost, which is consistent with what you've done with other private sewer extensions throughout town. So this is a real benefit. We want to, when we built the Queesit sewer system has the most unbettered, unallocated treatment capacity of any of our 3 districts. And we held on to that capacity specifically so that it could be purchased for use of development. What else here? One of the things that we did check with is it runs by the frontage of IBC, who is one of the larger tenants in, or technically abutting.
They're
the
abutting, but
industrial park.
they're right next to the industrial park. They've been asking for several years when Easton was going to sewer the industrial park area, and they are still interested in tying into the sewer.
So this
would
could create that opportunity. We can't, we're not speaking for them and binding them to it, but we're obviously going to be advancing sewer of the industrial park as well. But this, provided the developer moves forward, would probably happen sooner than the industrial park. So if that's an option for one of our local businesses to take advantage of new infrastructure and build out, then of course we want to work with them to see something like that happen. So we are in communication with them. Can't make any promises there, but we'll work hard if the housing comes to fruition, the developer builds that extension to make sure that industrial parcels that have access, if they wish to tie in, have that access too.
And I'd just like to stress that this is a grant that is only available to communities that have adopted their MBTA zoning, and it's specifically to help facilitate development under the zoning that was adopted by the town.
Just a question. Does the developer have a path if they chose not to? Is the septic even possible for 61 units in that area, or say they chose not to tie in?
I think they've always planned on tying in. They had approached us as the MBTA zoning was being considered and about developing that area, and they want to tie in. Potentially, it could.
I'm just saying if the cost was prohibitive, right? If they,
So I'm going to put our sewer engineer on the spot. I believe anything over 10,000 gallons per day is a DEP trigger for needing a treatment plant. Is that correct? Okay. So at 60 units, design flow and actual flow are very different things. But Joe, does the DEP require when you do a multifamily that you design to 220 per unit?
It would be.
Sure.
Good evening. I'm Joe Shea with Granite City Partners. If it's a single development for 60 units, in round numbers at 2 bedrooms a unit, that's normally 25 to 26,000 gallons per day. So that's absolutely well above any threshold for treatment for a septic system. So they'd be looking at their own small treatment facility as well. If the 60 units are spread over multiple parcels, they can try to do some type of geometry. But with sewer so close, it really is the most economical option, even though sewer is expensive. So are septic systems, and as we all know, so are treatment facilities.
And also the footprint to put the treatment facility on if they're trying to maximize the units on the
Right.
space.
Yeah.
Correct.
Makes much more sense.
great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jen?
Oh, no questions. Thank you.
Mark?
No questions, just comments, and I'm glad you pointed out that this is only possible because we became an MBTA community. Without that, this wouldn't exist. And for the people who are making suggestions, during the PACE engagement of, well, we need to supplement our revenue with more economic development. This is literally economic development at a good scale, in a good place.
Right. It brings housing that's much needed in Easton. It brings it in an area that we have focused as walkable neighborhood. We are looking once again, the planning board plans on looking at the zoning in that district to see if they can't spark more growth there. So you'll be bringing people who are a market for the services there, and also provide employment to the businesses and to the industrial park.
Correct.
It's an excellent location for the town, for this type of development.
Yeah, so just to round it off, between the economic development, the fact that this is because of a grant, $300,000 is not small. And to point out, it's not just for design, it's for the construction administration. So people say, $300,000 just to design. No, that's not it. It's for the construction administration, not actual construction.
Correct.
This is excellent.
Yeah, and Mark, I think since you're touching on it, I think it's important because I think there's sometimes some cynicism in communities when you build infrastructure and housing takes advantage of it more readily than perhaps business, and that's a reflection of where the market's at often. But it's that area wouldn't have sewer without the 40R Queesit that started with housing and now has some great restaurants and salons and other amenities for our whole community. Downtown wouldn't have the capacity for a lot of the business that's there without Shovelworks. 106 wouldn't have the capacity, wouldn't have had that sewer there without something like Avalon. And it's come up a lot at PACE, and a lot of folks, to their credit, are asking with curiosity and not judgment, are often surprised, to hear, oh, well, Avalon's our largest taxpayer by a substantial margin, right? So I just think it's important. That doesn't mean we don't have to continue to really make an effort, particularly when we're talking about doing things like sewering an actual industrial park. We do want to attract commercial taxpayers. But part of that is having housing for employees to actually be able to live in.
I just want to reiterate what Mark said, that this grant is because this community supported the MBTA zoning. And kudos to this community once again. And thank you very much for working on this grant.
And so for my notes, I was just to build off of what you were saying, Connor. You know, we have the 3 sewer districts, and the one that has been the slower to develop is Queesit. And part of the reason for that, I'm convinced, is because there's not enough housing there to attract the businesses to go there in the first place. Because there's, you know, more housing in our downtown and in the Five Corners area. I think that catalyzed the other, you know, businesses with a desire for economic development, because there's people living and walking and working in that area, so they have a base. And we've had people talking about that for years to us, but I think it was hard to visualize till we actually saw it come to fruition. I also do want to say, you know, when you talk about Avalon being the largest taxpayer, some might say, well, they use so many of our services. They're not. We have had the same staffing for our municipal services all while we've been adding housing. So we didn't have to hire 10 more police officers because of Avalon. I'm not saying that there's no impact, but it's certainly a net positive for the amount of taxes
revenue,
that we're
yes.
bringing in.
Right. I mean, and I think an important clarifying point there is we were understaffed before. We're still understaffed now.
Right.
We're not understaffed because.
Right.
Right. So that's a fair point.
And I also think, you know, if people are watching and listening and they hear that our our auditor has just said that there's unfunded mandates for this without doing any kind of a investigation as to fiscal impact. People think that now I'm hearing that people are saying, you know, any kind of a project that comes in, the town is responsible for some of that. So I'm glad that we clarified that $300,000 is a grant. If a developer came in and wanted to do this and we didn't have the grant, we wouldn't be responsible to do anything, to bring, you know, water, sewer, any kind of a financial impact. They would have to do that
Negotiate that
themselves.
so that they do that, and we do not externalize those costs onto the public.
Right, and I just think it's important for people to know, because, you know, people are saying, you know, why can't you just bring in more business? And we try to do that, and then we get, you know, but we don't want this kind of business or that kind of business, or, you know, why can't we do all of these things? You have to make a start with some of these, and, you know, 60 units is something you drive by, you really don't even notice it. It sounds like a lot, but it's not.
Right.
If you go by 244 Washington Street, right across from Langwater, you would never even know there's, 48 units,
Right.
you know, back there. So this is really not something that makes a stressful impact on our town services. And our school enrollment is still down with all of the housing that we've put in. And you might hear or watch some of the meetings where they say enrollment is up. Enrollment might be up for our preschool, our Blanche Ames, which we knew that, because when we built a new school like that, it's meant to bring families to that school. But on the other end, some of the other grades are tailoring off as kids might go to the regional schools or the Bristol Aggie or charter schools or things like that. So overall, the enrollment is still down. So I just want people to stop thinking that when we bring on housing, you know, the schools are overcrowded and filled with students. It's still not, so.
And Dottie, if I could just go back to what you started with when you were talking about that district being the slowest to really take off after the new zoning and the infrastructure, and again, that's why we're going to be looking at the zoning again. And yet you feel like the housing will help spark that area and bring more market to the businesses. That was one of the things we heard when one of the developments that was permitted didn't move forward because they couldn't get the financing. It was also something that was identified in the Queesit Commercial District Economic Development Strategic Plan, that if you had more housing in that area, more residences, you'd have more people that would be taking advantage of the services and the businesses that exist there.
That's a good point.
And coupled with, you know, being, you know, working on a connection with the industrial park and reimagining that park and seeing what we can do to maximize occupancy, maybe amenities, maybe some modernization of what that park looks like. It's I think this is going to be a really exciting time with a lot of really good opportunities down there. So again, thank you for that grant.
You're welcome.
And I guess we are ready for a motion.
So I move to authorize the town administrator to accept the $300,000 MBTA Communities Catalyst Grant.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Joe.
All right, number 9, contract award IT 2025-05 for Bulletproof Solutions Incorporated, Office 365 licenses and support.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. This was on a previous agenda. It was tabled. Our IT director was doing his part on carving out the deficit and renegotiating pricing, and I'm pleased that he got a 15% shift on this, so this price has been brought down. This is for all of our managed IT services and licenses for the town government. So thank you to Mike for that, and it sounds mean-spirited, but so his budget will be cut commensurately.
But I think that, when people are looking at, like, everybody wants to find a simple solution. What if you only tried this? What if you only tried that? These are things that typically happen amongst our departments that just happen as a matter of best practices, that they try to make sure that they're getting the best pricing, when they're able to do that, that we use procurement effectively. So I'm glad that you did put that in the notes. Normally, he might get a 15% discount, and we just don't mention it because it's just part of the work that we do. And I think it's important for us to be responsible to tell these things so the public knows that somebody did that. But it's not a shock. This is like, it's typical that is something that the department heads try to do. And congratulations to Mike for accomplishing it.
So I move to award contract IT 2025-05 Bulletproof Solutions Incorporated, Office 365 licenses and support in the amount of $102,438.60.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Before you move on, I'm supportive of it, but I just have a couple questions on that.
Sure.
Is that an annual license or is that a multi-year
It's
agreement?
annual.
It's an annual?
Yes.
Okay. And just curious, was that pulled from I know we have Bulletproof Solutions as a supplier.
Yes.
So it didn't have to go out to bid?
Correct, and it's actually, so we do this through a purchasing consortium. They're on the state bid list.
Okay.
For managed IT services. We are still, and that's how we negotiated for pricing, seeking quotes from competitors to make sure that we're getting good pricing.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great. All right, item 10, a vote to authorize the use of Stonehill College gift funds for schematic design and planning of the Easton Industrial Park sewer.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. As the board is aware, Easton is really excited that we've successfully negotiated an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Brockton for sewer treatment capacity at the industrial park. That's an economic development priority the town's been pursuing for about 25 years. So now that we've actually gotten that, we need to start some more work. And for us to get to work designing and building our fourth sewer system, the first steps will be schematic and planning level engineering and financial planning. Due to routine budget cuts over the years, we have limited to no consultant funds, and we usually rely on the Stonehill gift, which would come to the select board to request your authorization of the unassigned funds from the college. So I'm here tonight asking the board consider authorizing use of up to $11,500 of available gift funds donated by the college to commence with schematic design and planning to move the Easton Industrial Park sewer project forward. I did put some notes in the packet, and again, we're talking about it with every item. I suspect we will be forevermore, but there are folks who, understandably are concerned with the budget cuts we're having to impose to get to a balanced budget for fiscal 26, who might ask, well, why don't you just use those funds for some of the cuts you're having to make? And it's important to reiterate that these are, they're donated funds. They're not obligated funds. Stonehill's a tax-exempt institution. And this dollar amount is not something sufficient to plan recurring operating needs on. So I just think that's important to point out. And as we've touched on tonight, there's a host of macroeconomic things that allowed us to make it 19 years without an override, including low interest, low inflation. But there's also a lot of good policy choices that voters here have been very supportive of, with building infrastructure and catalyzing new growth that helped us make it this far. And we need to be looking out for the next 20 years as well. And so I'd like to get to work on this and get our team going, because we'll have a big project in front of us.
Well, I think that, there's been times where, things have happened, ups and downs. During COVID, when a lot of communities stopped any of the work that they were doing, for public infrastructure or building or things like that, Easton continued on with that, and we saved millions of dollars by capturing that time and that savings. That's part of why we ended up under budget on the Foundry Street sewer.
And on Blanche James.
And Blanche James, millions of dollars under budget, because we continued forward with that. So I feel like it might feel a little bit counterintuitive, like, wait a minute, how are we going to move forward with this when we're struggling with budget challenges? Doing these lines us up to get in for grants and bigger grants to just keep this project moving. But waiting on that is not going to help us get there. So by using this is a small amount of money to get a big amount of work done. That'll get us ready to start being able to apply for grants for that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you making the connection to the Foundry Street sewer, and it applies to our building projects as well. That's obviously something coming up quite a bit, is why are we advancing capital projects when we have an operating strain, and setting aside that the revenue streams are separate and can't be mixed to fix operations. It's so important to continue to highlight the facts that had we stopped Blanche James when a pandemic hit, which would have been a perfectly, justifiable thing to think, and waited, that would have added tens of millions in cost. We're seeing the press covering now the cost of construction of high schools in Massachusetts going over $500 million. There might be some folks who say, well, those are bigger buildings, but if you look at the per square foot cost, they're nearing public construction starting in 27 is being estimated around $1,000 per square foot, which is nearly 20% higher than the police, fire, public works contract you just awarded. 20% on $100 million is a $20 million cost increase for 2 years. I don't like any of those numbers, but those facts are really important. Yes. That we can be facing extreme challenges in our operating position or with things like COVID, and understandable as the temptation is to say, hold on, we're just going to hit the brakes on everything. It will cost much more in the long term.
And part of we have an obligation to be financially responsible, and I feel like this board's financially conservative, and that doesn't mean you don't spend money. It just means that you are selective with where you're spending the money and how you're using it to activate other things that help save money. So with the municipal buildings, remembering back why that was done in the first place is it takes buildings that are using, a lot of energy, that are using a lot of resources for repairs, that we're basically just throwing money away to fix a building that is not the right size, it doesn't have the right functions, environmentally not good in many, many different ways. So I think it's just important to kind of call that out while we're mentioning that.
Thank you.
All right, Craig.
I move to authorize.
Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes.
You got to jump in. We're moving fast.
So how much is the gift annually? Refresh my memory. The Stonehill gift typically.
It's typically around 40,000.
40,000. What's the balance now?
Looking to
$23,227.
23,000 and change for folks at home.
After 11.5, does that include the 11.5, or is that after the 11.5?
That's before the 11.5.
Okay, so we'll have a remaining balance of 12 and change.
Yes. Pending additional annual gift receipts, which are typically around this time of year.
Right. So by our new fiscal year, July 1, that will
yes, pending non-mandatory gift. Yes.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to know that. Thank you.
I move to authorize the use of Stonehill College funds for schematic design and planning of the Easton Industrial Park sewer in the amount of $11,500.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Terrific. Item 11, vote to accept the gift to the police department from Gino and Patricia Disciulo. I hope I said that right. The Easton Police Department received a monetary donation from Gino and Patricia Disciulo, and we have a memo from Chief Boone requesting consideration of the generous gift, noting that he recommends the funds be deposited into the police department's donation account. Also attached is a personal note from Chief Boone to the couple, thanking them for their support. So very generous. It's very heartening when people do this, and I'm sure that it makes our first responders feel very grateful as well. And Chief Boone is always wonderful about sending a very kind note of thanks afterwards. Any comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move to vote to accept the gift to the police department from Gino and Patricia Disciulo.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. All right. Next is a vote to reappoint Barbara Lerner to the Board of Registrars with a term expiration of March 31st, 2028. We have a letter included in our packet from Craig Bodger, who is chairperson of the Easton Democratic Town Committee, advising that the committee endorses the reappointment of Barbara Lerner as a Democratic Committee representative to the Board of Registrars with a term expiration of March 31st, 2028. Does anyone have any questions? So I just want to, Craig, do you want to just mention, if people are watching this, it could be confusing if they think that something's happening with Democrats and not Republicans. Can you just explain what that position kind of is?
Yeah, there are 2 positions from the Democrats and 2 from the Republicans working with the town clerk's office around voter registration. They're responsible for taking the votes that come into town hall and bring them over to the high school for them to be counted during an election. And Barbara's been on there for, I forget how long, but she's done a very good job, and so the committee recommended that we reappoint her,
Okay.
or the select board reappoint her.
And the Republican Town Committee should be doing the same thing as well. So, all right.
I'll let somebody else make the motion, sir.
I'll make a motion to reappoint Barbara Lerner to the Board of Registrars with the term expiration of March 31st, 2028.
Second,
That's Lamb and Stacy.
Stebbins Lerner.
Stacy Lerner.
Lamb Lerner.
Full Janetti Lerner.
Roger Lerner.
Great. Congratulations, Barbara, and thank you for your service. Item 13, review the May 19th, 2025 annual town meeting warrant draft.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. Attached in your packet, and I believe made available to the public online and in our lobby, is the first draft of the annual town meeting warrant for May 19th. As is our practice, you'll review the draft as it iterates over the next couple of months before town meeting. You have 2 items that we are asking for your inclusion tonight because they're closest to housekeeping, I suppose. They're the same every year. And whether or not you'd like to make any recommendations. I want to highlight a couple of aspects of the warrant that the board probably recognizes. This is a extremely short warrant for an annual town meeting. It is currently about 12 or 13 articles. We have town meetings that range from 25 and 40. This is because many of our committees, including the Planning and Zoning Board, appreciating the significance and the focus and likely the duration of the debate and decisions our voters need to make on the budget. I don't want to say have cleared the field, but they've cleared the field. Because May 19th is going to be focused on the budget. PACE will present to town meeting. You see that right on the front page. We put the budget, the presentation by PACE first, the budget, and a override contingent budget to be determined pending final recommendation from PACE and action by this board as the first items out of the gate, because those are obviously extremely impactful.
So I know we've talked about this a lot, but I feel like we should say it every time we talk about it. So what will happen is there are going to be 2 budgets presented. There's going to be a budget that's presented as if there is no override, and that's the one that's going to see the cuts. When people are saying live within your means, that's the one that we're going to look at, and it's going to be very drastic changes on there.
Right.
We're also going to have a whole separate budget that says if you don't want those cuts, here's a different budget that you could vote for that would mean an override.
Correct.
Town meeting would vote on what they want to do with those budgets. And then from there, it has to go to a public election at the ballot and it has to pass there as well.
For
Did
the
I say that?
override to take
For the
effect, yes.
override.
Procedurally, it's important for folks, even if you're a hypothetical person who wants to vote for an override budget, the balanced non-override budget still needs to be adopted, because if the override passes at town meeting and then fails at the ballot, which it did in 2016, you need a budget in place for come July 1. So that's why there's two.
So town meeting is voting to appropriate the money.
That's correct.
The ballot is voting to raise
The taxes to pay for it. That's right.
So that's why there's two.
Right. So it's a brief warrant, but I do not think it'll be a short meeting. The two articles we have in front of you tonight for consideration, as you see, this is a very early draft. There's a lot of blanks, as is typical this early on. We'll fill them in as time goes. It's the acceptance of annual reports. We produce a town report every year in this office. It gets voted on by town meeting. That's Article 6. I'll flag out of the gate, for my staff's benefit, we might rearrange articles as we go, or if the board has any strong feedback. There's sometimes concern about having less material items after a budget in case you lose quorum. But again, I expect very, very high turnout of this. So I am comfortable with how we've rearranged it, but if anyone isn't, let us know.
I think these are things that are usually just like you read them and people vote yes. They're not controversial. They're more housekeeping type of issues. We always accept the annual reports of the committees, things like that. So I think you've got this set up appropriately.
Okay. So if the board's willing to vote to include and recommend Article 6, the acceptance of annual reports.
I move to accept and recommend Article 6.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Next one is Article 8, elected officials compensation.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. State law requires that if any elected officials receive any compensation, it's voted on annually at town meeting. Very few elected officials do, and everyone who does receives a nominal amount. This is the same it's been, I think, for 20 years, so.
No COLA.
No.
No, I think it's like, what, $40 a week? Or less?
I think it's less than that after they take tax out of it.
I know there's some commentary out there about like why bother, but I think it's really important to note that like this is money that could encourage people who may not have the resources otherwise to pursue a role like select board. It could cover the cost of childcare or other things that are really important. So, and any one of us up here spends more than that in the town with the things we go to and things we give back. So I just thought it was important to call out.
Yep, thank you. I agree. All right, Craig.
Move to include and recommend Article 8.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. All right, and discussion and possible vote. Oh, wait a second. So that's item 14.
Yep.
I want to skip, can I skip that and just get to the minutes and notes, just to get that out of the way?
Sure.
So item 15, the acceptance of minutes from February 24th, 2025.
So move, Bodger.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Town administrator notes?
I have none prepared.
Assistant town administrator notes? I know you got a big announcement about next week.
Next Monday, we'll be kicking off the 2025 Citizens Academy, the fourth iteration of starting up with administration, and we're switching up this year. We're not doing finance, we're doing the town clerk and town moderator. It'll continue on for 10 weeks, and it will culminate in a graduation ceremony on June 2nd at this board table. Other than that, we've talked about economic development. Director Danielson, who's no longer with us now, and I, and then Craig for one of the two. We had 2 ribbon cuttings last week to welcome 2 new businesses in town at 661 Washington Street. We had Silco VW come in as a new development, VW dealership, and then Planet Fitness in the Shaw's Plaza. So we wanted to welcome them as new businesses to town.
That's great.
Sean, how many folks are in Citizens Academy?
16.
Great, thank you.
16, so
Excellent.
it's a good number.
Any selectmen notes?
I'd just like to plug the YMCA's annual spin-a-thon is happening on March 22nd, so it's a week from Saturday. And that's really their one major fundraiser. And when you look at everything they do for not just our community, but the greater Old Colony consortium of 7 YMCA's, a great opportunity, folks, to come out and support what I think is a wonderful mission.
Thank you.
No notes from me?
No notes.
None?
Second, none. Sorry,
I
Craig.
have a couple. One is that we've just been advised that the special election to replace the deceased Carol Doherty will be handled on May 13th is the primary, and June 10th is the general election for that. That's Bristol 3, which is part of Taunton, and precincts 4A, 5, and 6 here in Easton.
Okay, great. Good to know. All right, with all of that, I'm going to ask that we go into an executive session under Purpose 3 of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with all town bargaining units, and we will return to open session after that. So we can hang tight, and we would ask Eric to keep an eye. We're going to deliberate in a different room, and then we'll come back to this room, and we'll wrap it up and adjourn the meeting. So we need a vote, a motion and a second, and a roll call vote to enter into executive session.
So moved, Bud.
Second, Lamb.
Bodger and Lamb?
Stebbins.
Stacy, yes?
Lamb, yes.
Full Janetti, yes?
Roger, yes.
All right, great. Eric will be back shortly. Back and ready when you are.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. You all set, Sean? All right. So we are back from our executive session, and I'm very pleased to let the public know that we were able to ratify 6 agreements with the Easton Police Officers Association, the Easton Police Supervisors
Sorry, Dottie.
Association.
5, 1, we tabled 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Which
all,
one did we table?
those professional admin. The third one is tabled.
Okay, all right.
Oh, that's right.
I'm sorry about that. So the 5 were the Easton Police Officers Association, the Easton Police Supervisors Association, Southeastern Public Employees Association, Southeastern Public Employees Association DPW unit. The first one is clerical unit, and the third one is DPW water unit. So I just want to thank, our employees for coming to the table and, working with us to come up with a agreement that we can get through that will help us move forward. And Connor, if you would be so kind as to just give a little bit more detail on that for people.
Sure, thanks, Dottie. As we flagged in our budget memos, we were carrying the equivalent of a 2% cost of living in our preliminary budget. We are obviously sensitive to the fact that is below the rate of inflation. And I want to give a lot of credit to our employees. These 5 agreements represent more than a majority of the town's workforce. Who we approached to take a 1-year extension at either a 2 or something costing a 2, despite their rights to bargain for a longer contract or seek additional terms. Frankly, just being very open about what we've all been talking about so much, which is that we're facing a legitimate budget crisis next year. There's a lot of uncertainty for their members, our employees, for our residents, and any measure of certainty we can give in a tough budget is a positive thing. And so these agreements have some whereas sections that I think are worth reading into the record, and they're true for all of the unions who have come on board with this. And I want to read this to recognize and thank our employees. Whereas the town of Easton faces an unprecedented budget deficit beginning July 1st, 2025, fiscal 26, which brings a significant amount of financial and programmatic uncertainty. And whereas said uncertainty makes a productive bargaining for a 3-year contract to commence on July 1st, 2025 extremely difficult. And whereas the town, and in this case the Easton Patrol Officers Association, desirous to maintain and sustain harmonious working relationships and to promote more productive bargaining in the near future for the benefit of their members, where the town's longer-term financial position will be more concrete. And whereas both parties, without waiving their rights to future bargaining positions, agree to a 1-year extension of the existing collective bargaining agreement set to expire this June, recognizing it is in the mutual interest of the parties and the Easton community in order to provide predictable budgeting during a time of significant uncertainty. I think that's worth noting, that our employees appreciate that. These are groups who have jobs that are being cut as we talk about this, and came to the table with us. On this one for patrol, we concluded with the select board, the town administrator, and the chief of police wish to recognize the members of the Easton Patrol Officers Association and convey their sincere appreciation for their service to the police department and the entire Easton community. The union's willingness to consider this MOA in lieu of a full contract at a time of significant economic volatility demonstrates their commitment to this community. So I have worked with these employees for a long time. It has been a privilege to be able to do so. And I'm very, very much appreciative to the members and the leadership of these unions for working with us during a really challenging time to provide some small measure of stability and predictability. I really appreciate them. And I know all of you do too.
Yeah, thank you for.
Thank you for your work on that as well. And this is really tough. This is really tough. It's tough on you. It's tough on our community. It's tough on the board. And I just want to recognize that as well. This is not fun. It's not easy. And everybody's trying to do the right thing. We're just trying to get to where we can, where we can land that's going to be the best situation out of a bad situation. So thank you very much. So if there's no other comments, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move, Barger.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone, and if you're watching until now, thank you to ECAT for being here to film for us. Have a good night.